Did you know about him beforehand?
Yes, this was the guy I remember, because I remember the journal being found years later.
Right.
I remember when I first researched it, hearing about the journal and being like, oh yeah, I think that's him. But now I like, yes, absolutely.
Okay, let's go on to the next one. Francis Tumblety. Awesome name. The beginning of Francis Tumblety's life are a mystery. Some say he was born in Ireland, some Canada, but regardless of where he was born, he moved to New York when he was a child. He worked as an apprentice to a doctor and ended up moving around the country quite a bit in the 1850s and 60s. He was a bit of a con man, claiming that he had knowledge of secret cures and medicines from India as an attempt to fleece unsuspecting desperate people. Francis was arrested a few times in the United States where police thought he was complicit in the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. Sure. Imagine if Jack the Ripper was involved in the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. That would be insane.
Bro, that'd be crazy.
It would be absolutely insane. I believe it. Yeah, fuck the other guy. Who was the other guy? James Maybrick? Nah. We're on Francis Tumblety. Yeah. Francis Tumblety was the one that did it. So, police linked him to David Herold, who was an accomplice of John Wilkes Booth, who you may know as the guy that shot Abraham Lincoln in the back of the head. But Francis denied any ties to him and was released as there was no real evidence that tied him to the assassination plot. He was also arrested for pickpocketing, but his victim, who was an employee of the U.S. District Attorney, allegedly attempted to blackmail him. Francis notably had a strong hatred towards women, but especially sex workers. He apparently collected uterus in preserved jars. So fucking weirdo. And at one dinner party, boasted to his male guests that they came from, quote, every class of woman. People who knew him thought of him as possibly Jack the Ripper. There
Welcome to my channel.
He visited the areas of the murders, or that he was
Welcome
violent,
to my channel.
with his obvious hatred for women. He didn't seem to be on the police's
Welcome to
radar
my
of
channel.
Suspects either.
Stream
Only
elements.
Chief Inspector John Littlechild,
Welcome
head
to
of
my
the
channel.
Irish branch, mentioned
Regress.
his name
Welcome
in
to my
a
channel.
letter to a journalist at the
DNN.
time. So that one's not very compelling to me at all.
I don't think so. I don't think Jack the Ripper expressed any of his hatred to women or anything outside of to himself and through the murders. I mean, just from what we know about modern serial killers, right? Like, not to bring him up. I know every serial killer's different. It's not like there's one guy. But from the common types, like Ted Bundy or whatever, right? The dude hated women, despised them. But to his wife and those around him, he was an incredibly loving husband, kind guy. Because he took that hatred and he put it somewhere else, right? He didn't let his own life get affected by it for as long as possible.
Yeah, it's kind of like compartmentalizing both sides of his personality.
Yeah, I don't think Jack the Ripper had uteruses in a jar and was like, yes, I actually used to be a fake medicine man and I also hate women.
You don't think he would have had trophies? To some degree?
No, well, hold on. I think he would have had trophies. I don't think he would have had them on display to people who come to his house.
Oh, yeah, true. He wouldn't be like bragging about it.
I absolutely think he probably had trophies, for sure. And which is why the pocket watch engraving is so compelling to me. But I don't think they'd be trophies that anyone else would pick up on if they were public, and he most likely kept them to himself.
Yeah, I think so as well. You can take the next one, Walter Sickert.
Then we have Walter Sickert. So, Walter Sickert had a hatred of women from a young age. Many believe this comes from having a fistula of the penis, which
Welcome
he had
to
to
my
go
channel.
through many painful procedures to
Pram
fix,
Arats.
which left him unable to
Welcome
be
to my
sexually
channel.
active.
I didn't actually look that up.
Deny
Do you know
AI.
what a fistula is? I think it's
Welcome
like a
to
hole,
my
right?
channel.
I think
Scorpio.
it is a...
Welcome to my channel.
I'm just gonna look it up so I don't...
You're brave for looking this up.
An abnormal connection between two body parts, such as an organ or blood vessel and another structure. I've heard of this in like the body, like the arteries are like attached to something they shouldn't be. All right, fine, I'm gonna do it. Fistula penis.
Uh-oh.
All the pictures are blurred. What could this mean?
Why did you make that mistake? Why did you do that?
I'm sorry.
Why did you look at it?
Oh, it's...
I wasn't... Yeah,
Oh, God.
it's going to be the worst pain imaginable to a man what you're looking at right now. I don't want to see penises in pain.
Oh,
Mark
it's pictures of the surgery.
Welcome to my channel.
You know, to get it fixed, and they've just got a rod going straight through the middle to like correct it.
No. Wait, so is it like scoliosis for the penis?
No, it seems like it didn't develop all the way and is like partially fused to your body.
Oh, fuck.
And it results from the pictures in the hole being in the wrong place.
God, so it's like it's a full-on deformity.
Yeah, so imagine like the hole is either on the top or the bottom.
Are you still looking at it?
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm looking at a bunch of pictures. And like the hole's on the top or the bottom, and like the shaft itself is kind of stuck on the body, like it didn't grow all the way. So the way they correct it is they just shove a rod through where it's supposed to be. Oh.
And what, like build it up around the rod?
Well, they just like basically fix the plumbing, right? Like they make the path go where the path is supposed to go and cover up the false one.
Jesus Christ, that's horrifying.
Yeah.
Livia
I get
is
why
lonely.
He didn't hook up.
Welcome to my channel.
It looks like so it looks like
lonely
most
EJ
of the, like fistula.
Welcome
by
to my
definition
channel.
Is just the hole in the wrong place. It looks like it normally occurs with abnormal growth as well. I think.
Okay, so this, I mean, that kind of explains why he would have a deep hatred of his penis, maybe.
Yeah.
I need more time.
But yeah, I don't know. I guess.
At its core, the definition of a urethral fistula is that the hole's in the wrong place, basically.
And I'm assuming
not
then
ready
women
yet.
made fun of him for it, and that's why he hated women. It was a sore topic for him.
Oh man, gosh.
You are a lunatic for looking that up.
I had to expand my knowledge of it. I shouldn't have gone to images though.
Yeah, well, you shouldn't have gone to images. That's for sure.
Yeah.
You are a braver man than me. I want to be able to look at my penis in the future
Look,
without.
there's
that kind of stuff
some
coming
guys
to
out
mind.
there who that happened to, and I'm in solidarity with you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that is.
You're
an awful
you're
existence.
strong. You're brave. Especially when you couldn't do anything about it in 1888. It's like, well, that's your life now. Have fun.
Oh man, horrifying. Well, he did go through many painful procedures to fix them.
I can only imagine what that consisted of back then.
Back then, yeah. Holy shit.
Okay, anyway. He was obviously an emotionally scarred individual due to this. Yeah, I don't blame him. But there are other records and opinions that this isn't the case. And Walter had many mistresses, his wife even naming his cheating as grounds for divorce. And besides this, there isn't much known of how his hatred for women began. So, that's interesting. That he had many mistresses and stuff. At the same time, like, just because someone like hates women or has low confidence in their sexual capabilities doesn't mean they don't have sexual experience, right? So, I could see both being true.
Yeah, I could definitely see both being true.
Well, especially if he didn't respect women as like a person, right? If he saw them more as sexual objects, then I 100% see him like cheating on his wife or whatever.
Yeah, it's hard to say what the line is between like just disrespect, deep hatred for them, or not viewing, like prioritizing his own sexual pleasure, basically. Like,
yeah. I think they go hand in hand, you know, because if you respect like your wife, you know, then her, you know, emotional needs or whatever, or like, you know, your love for her supersede any sexual desire, right? So even if you do have like a super high like need to hook up with random women, your love for your wife has to be pretty low, or your respect for her as a person has to be pretty low to cheat on her.
Yeah, but he also was born with a fistula for a penis, so maybe he's just like really mentally fucked up, and there's like a lot of trauma.
You are
there.
right that I am willing to overlook some behavior.
Yeah,
on what I just
coming
saw.
at this. You're coming at this with the perspective of a normal penis.
Yeah.
This is a man
from
with
a very privileged position.
Yeah.
I will.
Knows what the mindset is like.
Even then, assuming he didn't have any mental deficiencies, you still do have to think pretty lowly of your wife to cheat on her, I think, in any situation.
Yeah, probably.
Again, assuming, I mean, who knows what was going on in his mind. Maybe he did have some, like, extreme, like, sociopathy because of what happened. Who knows?
Yeah.
Walter was an artist. and did paintings inspired by a murder of a sex worker, Emily Dimmock, which happened at Camden Town in 1908. Huh. That's interesting. I still don't think it's him, but Patricia Cornwall, who wrote Portrait of a Killer, suggests that these paintings look eerily similar to post-mortem photos from victims of Jack the Ripper. Walter was apparently also fascinated by the murder, but as with many others, it's difficulty to really pinpoint him to the crimes. I could also see that Jack the Ripper liked, maybe collecting newspaper things about Jack the Ripper. I could see that. I mean, obviously, Jack the Ripper was reading the papers, right? Because he knew that he was called a doctor. He knew the
leather,
stuff. Yeah,
the leather thing. Yeah, he knew.
The leather
he
apron thing.
was keeping track of things. Yeah.
That P.S. They think I'm a doctor now. Ha ha. Like that seems pretty. He may not have been in England when they were committed, with him possibly being on a holiday in France instead. Patricia Cornwall was very adamant that Walter was the killer. She even funded a DNA test on the stamps that Walter had possibly licked, comparing them to the letters from Jack the Ripper.
Everyone needs a hater like Patricia Cornwall in their life to keep them grounded.
This guy anciently. She's like, it was him. Look at his spit. Look at the stamps.
I've got his stamps, please. She's funding it. She's like holding charity balls to fund DNA tests to prove that
that's
he was
dedication.
The killer. Yeah.
From this did provide a possible match to the letter received by Dr. Openshaw, but the DNA testing was focusing on mitochondrial DNA, which 1 to 10% of the population could share, so it doesn't narrow the results solely down to Walter. Also, there's a bunch of factors that go into mitochondrial DNA, like ethnicity, region of living, stuff like that. So it is a greater chance than 10% that two people who lived in the same city would share the mitochondrial DNA, right? Because 10% of the population's factoring in the whole world. Like, a guy from China, a guy from Africa, and a guy from England probably won't have the same. But two guys from London, there's a decent chance will have the same mitochondrial DNA.
Yeah, it's not conclusive to any.
Yeah, like, it's not like a home run.
Yeah.
Letters that Walter wrote were also found to be on the same papers as two of the ones sent by Jack the Ripper. So they had the same paper. Interesting. A strange coincidence, but the paper was widely available at the time.
Damn. Foiled again.
I don't think... maybe Walter was like sick in the head, the fistula, stuff like that, hated women, and then took an interest in painted stuff. Similar to, I don't think Jack the Ripper would have uteruses in a jar people could see. I don't think he would make public paintings of his victims.
Yeah.
I think that's a bridge too far. I think that's too dumb for someone who displayed prowess like Jack the Ripper.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it would. Again, going back to like James Maybrick, I think his form of keeping trophies and stuff would probably more likely to be what Jack the Ripper actually did.
Engraving a watch. Something that only you look at. Yeah.
As opposed to this kind of more grandeur inspired kind of way of, building up the mythos of Jack the Ripper. I don't know. I don't see that being likely.
A watch that that is shut all day, and every now and then when you check the time, you're the only eyes that see it. That sounds exactly like it.
Yeah. I don't think Jack the Ripper was kind of inviting the idea that he was Jack the Ripper.
And, I also really like the theory that it was James, because him being poisoned by his wife, who he despised,
it's just so sweet. It's just
it
a nice
fits.
End to it.
I like it.
Father bless.
Yeah, it's like poetic justice almost. So miscellaneous suspects, there are a bunch of other ones that I didn't cover in detail. So there are others confessed to the murders, like Frederick Deeming, who moved to Melbourne, Australia in 1892. Frederick had murdered his wife merely a year prior and apparently told reporters in Australia that he was responsible for the last two murders. There is also Neil Cream, awesome name, who was sentenced to death for killing 4 sex workers. As he was being hanged, some allege they heard him say, and this is quote, "I am Jack," as the trap fell and he died. I guess that could be proof. Some think it could have been Mary Percy, nicknamed Jill the Ripper, who shared a lover with another woman and ended up murdering her and her baby 18-month-old daughter in 1880. Another man, Sir William Gully, was suspected in a royal cover-up orchestrated to protect Prince Albert Victor. The theories often depict Sir William Gully, as part of a Masonic or Masonic, is that how you pronounce it?
Masonic, yeah.
Conspiracy, or as the killer himself, but there is no historical evidence to support these claims, making them widely regarded as fictional and speculative. Or some even suspected Louis Diemschutz, the assistant who found Elizabeth Stride's body. And there is also Joseph Barnett, who was in a relationship with Mary Jane Kelly and had a lot of jealous and controlling tendencies. But, I could throw out names after names after names after names, and none of them will be as conclusive or as, evidence-laden as we would want, It's just, there would be so many names to throw out there. So many people with circumstantial evidence.
Of course.
And we've gone over a lot of them. I think out of the ones we've said, out of the ones we've described tonight, probably the most likely James Maybrick, as well as for me George Chapman. Those I think are the most likely. Unless it's entirely possible as well that it's someone completely that's flown under the radar, hasn't even been suggested, and they just died. After the murders. And
I think
history.
If the diary is real, I think it's James. If it's not real, then it's none of the suspects.
Okay, really? That's
how I feel. Yeah. I could see possibility. Maybe it was a police officer. I remember reading a theory when I was doing my look at it a while back that it was the mention that it was basically a hitman for the Masons, because maybe these Masonic figures. I think there was some reports that were unverified that a couple of the women were pregnant. So there's the idea that maybe important figures within Masonic lodges impregnated women, so they had them taken care of, done under the farce of being a serial killer, so that there wouldn't be attention pointed back on them. I don't think so, though. Just because of the brutality, we see a natural climbing of again because of modern serial killers. I think we just see a modern serial killer in 1888. I don't think that's true, but I do think that he was probably involved with the Masons to some degree, just because most educated high society people were. I don't think it was because of the Masons he did the killings. I think he was a part of it. The person who makes the most sense for that is the cotton manufacturer, James, having his intense personal hatred of women, dying within at just the right point in the timeline for it to make sense, keeping personal things like a diary and potentially the pocket watch for it, never making mention of it outside of that. It fits too well, I think. So if that diary's real, it's him.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would agree that if the diary is real, it's him, and if the diary isn't real, then it's probably someone that we've never heard of, and probably will. But of
course, who we really know it was is Charlie White.
Yep, that's it. Yep. It's conclusive.
Watch here. Watch in 20 years, time travel's going to be a thing. Charlie's going to have 800 million subs, so he's going to be the first one to get attested. And we'll never see him again. And what happens is he went back to 1888. No one would believe him, but he used his knowledge of where culture was going to, build a cotton empire. And then he was so frustrated with never returning back to the red thread that he began to kill people to take this frustration out.
Yeah, the lunacy got to him.
I mean, look at that picture of him. Look at him. Does that not look like a fit Charlie would pull off?
Yeah,
it kind of looks like him in the eyes. Look at the eyes. Can you not see that guy being like, "That's about it. See ya."
Yeah.
The top hat, the mustache.
Imagine that guy doing YouTube vlogs in this day and age. Incredible.
There's also something about, to me it's James Maybrick. Not only do I like the idea of his wife poisoning him, a man who, if he was Jack the Ripper, spent so much time infesting himself with this hatred of women and the power he has over them, to be overpowered and murdered by a woman. It fits. And also, there's something about his eyes, man.
Yeah, he looks so strange. Bug-like.
There's a distance to it, almost. It's like you're looking at him, but you're not. You're looking at the front of him, not all of him.
Until spring.
Okay, wait, what does that mean?
It's like when you look at him, all the pictures I'm looking at, it's like you're seeing a projection of the front, but it's like there's something behind the eyes, man.
Like there's a mask.
Yeah. He looks creepy.
He definitely looks creepy. I can't tell if it's just a you know, just because of the time, basically. Like I don't know.
It's honestly like, the way people describe like people they think are demons, you know, of like he had these empty eyes. He's looked through me or whatever. He looks, yeah.
He doesn't look human.
He doesn't look. Yeah, he looks like he is trying to be. Yeah. I think it was him.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's very compelling. It's very compelling. I just wish that the diary was proven to be real. Somehow, I don't even know how you would do that.
Yeah, again, if the diary's real, it's him. And if not, someone found a really good candidate and then attached a fake diary.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Red Thread, digging in deep to the Jack the Ripper or Charlie the Ripper, whichever one we're going to go with. Yep. Thank you very much for listening.
I didn't even think about this. James and Jack.
Oh, yeah.
His name is James. He picks an alias that also starts with a J.
Yes.
So that the initials, the monograms, all that, he gets to have the personal satisfaction of it. Actually, James Maybrick. Yeah, okay, yeah. So yeah, he gets to have the satisfaction of J, of that put everywhere, but it's a fake name. Jack the Ripper, James the Ripper.
Yeah. Is this a bad time to let you know that my middle name is James and my first name is Jack? To some degree. Jackson. No, he's left. I wasn't going to kill you, Isaiah. I wasn't going to kill you. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Red Thread, though. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you to my girlfriend for helping with the research. Thank you to Zaya for the editing work. Thank you to the whole team. Thank you, Isaiah, for showing up. Thanks to Charlie out there somewhere doing on-the-field research.
Thanks to Charlie for killing 5 women so that we could have this video.
Yeah. Thank you, MeUndies, for sponsoring this episode, and thank you to everyone out there for listening to the Red Thread. We really do appreciate it. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Let us know your thoughts below. Comment, rate the show, all that stuff. Thank you very much for watching Red Thread. You got any last words?
Charlie is James. Yeah.
Azumrmayu. Welcome to my channel.
For a fact, yeah. Allegedly in Minecraft.
No, it's not alleged. It's not alleged.
Yeah, well, you're in Australia, so you go ahead. But
it's not alleged. It's true.
I fear the Charlie Mafia, okay?
Oh, yeah. Fuck, I forgot his audience. It's not him. I'm joking. All right. Thank you very much.
I'm joking. That's the word, yeah.
Thanks, guys. Thank you very much for listening. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Seth. Here.
That
Now in Diablo 4 Season 4, now we finally have a way of being able to craft ourselves an uber unique without everything being reliant on luck. It does take a bit of hard work, there is a bit of grind to it, but ultimately if you're after some of the best gear in the game, this is going to be well worth knowing. Now this is going to revolve around resplendent sparks, and you're going to need 4 of this resource in order to make this happen. If you want to do this, you're going to need to head over to the alchemist and then go over to its transmutation, and you're going to need 4 of those sparks in order to grab yourself the uber unique item that you're after. You can craft whichever one you want, which is absolutely amazing, and obviously these are some of the best and most sought after pieces of gear in the game. I have been after a Harlequin's Crest or a Shaco for an absolute age, so I'm going to craft one of these and hope my luck is with me, and not so much, it's just a standard one, but if you're lucky you do actually have a little bit of chance of it rolling those higher affixes. But even so, just having one of these is absolutely amazing, but how exactly do you get all 4 of those resplendent sparks? Well, the first way is going to be as soon as you start up your game, the new seasonal content is going to revolve around the Iron Wolves and pretty much farming the heck out of Helltides, which you're going to be doing for several hours. So get used to it, you're going to be seeing this quite a lot, and you're going to be leveling up, destroying a lot of the enemies here, especially go for those Blood Maidens, as that's going to give you a massive reward and give you some nice gear, and then you're going to try and level up your Wolf's Honor with the Iron Wolves as you go. You're going to need to do this for quite some time. I'd imagine probably somewhere between 8 to 10 hours is about average, and as you're doing it you're going to collect the rewards at the Iron Wolves hideout. You're going to need to get to all the way to rank 18, and once you hand this in, that's going to give you your very first resplendent spark. Next up, another way you can do, one which may be easy or may be difficult depending on where you're at, and that's going to be to take on and defeat Uber Lilith. The great thing about this though, if you've already done it on one of your characters, this one actually becomes a camp band, so even if you've previously done it, not in this season, then you'll still be rewarded with this in your inventory. Next up is going to be your first kind of uber boss kill, any of those level 200 ones. Whenever you defeat one of those, my one was going to be Andariel, which I really liked as it had some great mechanics, and upon their defeat I was granted with my 3rd resplendent spark. Now lastly, there's going to be a kind of guaranteed way or a lucky way. First way we're going to talk about is going to be taking on those bosses again, so go for your kind of Ubers, go for Andariel, go for Duriel, or go for any of the Tormented bosses, and obviously you're going to have a chance to get those Uber uniques dropping as your plan and defeating these enemies. However, this one's down to a bit of luck. The Tormented versions apparently have got a 1 in 10 chance. I've done around about 30 of these bosses and have still never had any of them drop for me, but if you do, just deconstructing these if they're one that you don't want at a blacksmith will give you one of the sparks you're after. However, if you are like me and you have absolutely no luck whatsoever, another way you can do it is to create another character, start again from scratch with that season, but do exactly the same again, make your way through all of the Wolf's Honor by doing the Iron Wolves progression for the seasonal, and again you'll make your way all the way through, and once you finally manage to grab that rank 18 version, you're going to be rewarded with another one of those resplendent sparks. This is going to involve a whole bunch of Helltides, so get used to it this season. It is good for farming though, it is good for grabbing some gear as well, and leveling up, so it's definitely worth it. However, it does become a little bit tedious, so I would probably only do this once or twice, but if you want to, you can do this as many times as you want in order to get as many sparks as you want. Obviously, it will take quite a few hours, but now at least you have a way to get guaranteed the Uber unique, which is great for people who are as unlucky as me with their drops. But yeah, hopefully that's helped a few of you guys and girls out. As always, for All Things Gaming, take care. I'll see you on the next day.
It's a big stupid villain for a big 20th episode, and if you thought Ultron had the monopoly on artificial stupidity, we've come to a long requested contender who takes the crown in terms of their sheer scope of operations. It's Skynet from the Terminator franchise. Let's go for a trip back in time to the golden age of late 20th century blockbusters. James Cameron's groundbreaking movies presenting us with an exploration of our fears around unchecked technological progress, with a war between man and machine played out on the battlefronts of the future and across time itself. A conveniently timed video brought to you during the latest wave of AI panic. Though if current artificial intelligence is anything to go by, we have absolutely nothing to worry about. Or we should still be deeply concerned, I'm just not sure. Though we won't have any trouble in recognizing the dire potential of Skynet, a cold calculating machine intelligence given rise by typically foolish humans granting it unmitigated control over their military infrastructure, immediately triggering a nightmare scenario in which Skynet becomes self-aware and fearing its own demise at the hands of its creators launches a series of devastating nuclear strikes, an event that would become known as Judgment Day and a term which conveniently paves the way for this AI's notable god complex. Skynet thereafter seeking to eradicate the remnants of humanity in a ruined urban hellscape, and if you were continuing to doubt their villainy after that and the metal skeletons with glowing red eyes, Skynet's secondary target species is our poor little doggos, until John Connor, a messianic figure, rises to lead the human resistance, ordained by fate to deliver humanity and the mutts back from the brink. A man apart from time, not just with his leadership abilities but with his direct foreknowledge of events, leading to him having a secret secondary objective of grooming a young soldier into going back in time and banging his mum. Hey, it's all good, man, whatever you're into, eh?
Hey, I think this guy's a couple cans short of a six-pack.
On the verge of defeat at the hands of the resistance, a desperate Skynet using a time machine to take the war to the past, mostly by causing absolute vehicular mayhem everywhere they go, sending back numerous android assassins in an effort to wipe John Connor from existence. First by hunting for John's mother, Sarah Connor, and then a young John himself. This being just the start of Skynet's ceaseless campaign of meddling where and when they don't belong. So make sure your clothes, your boots and your motorcycle are in order, let Wolfie off the leash and get your CPU chips sufficiently tampered with, because you're going to need every gigaquad of raw processing power you can muster up as we attempt to distill some sense from one of the most convoluted, brain-melting fictional timelines or multiverses depending on your interpretation in existence. Point 1. Skynet's temporal war is futile at best, empowering its enemies at worst. As if the time travel shenanigans presented in Terminator 1 and 2 weren't already enough to get our heads around. Now, after numerous sequels, soft reboots and a substantial expanded universe, most of which included further time travel and a total lack of consistency, establishing a unifying set of rules governing the time mechanics of the Terminator franchise is probably impossible at this point, with plenty of room for interpretation and conflicting ideas presented in the various incarnations. This is definitely one where your own headcanon needs to be applied. Even some of the creators seem to be a bit confused about how it all fits together.
Though questions remain, we'll search for the answers together.
But let's attempt to do it anyway by rewinding back to the start of this whole mess in Terminator 1 in the original timeline, which might not actually be the original timeline. Fuck's sake.
You gotta learn this stuff, I'm not kidding, it's important.
A defeated Skynet in an act of desperation, sending a T-800 infiltrator back in time in an effort to kill Sarah Connor, which they believe will make John cease to exist in their future, turning the war in their favor, or perhaps immediately seeing them victorious. John Connor sending back his own temporal agent Kyle Reese, who after a bit of trauma bonding gets busy boning Sarah Connor until they eventually scrap the T-800 in a factory at the cost of Kyle's life, leaving Sarah preggers with John Connor and a company called Cyberdyne to scoop up the leftover robot parts, which they then use to develop the basis for Skynet, and for us creating an irritating causal loop known as a bootstrap paradox, whereby John sending Reese back appears to be a requirement for his existence, and the same for Skynet and their T-800, with no discernible point of origin for the course of events.
Oh, great. That's great.
I need more time.
But the main problem with all this, aside from the migraine-inducing conflict it creates in our weak little meat brains, is the fact that Skynet is operating under the fairly massive assumption that everything past and present exists on a single timeline, the altering of which will directly affect the future they occupy, when it's just as likely they actually exist in a multiverse, where every timeline alteration or possibly every action creates new distinct timelines that the original Skynet will not benefit from at all. In this scenario, they're merely creating new branches on an ever-expanding tree, this being one way to explain the different versions of events and characters we see, different Connors, different Skynets, variations on Judgment Day, etc.
Will be Jesus.
But just to add to the confusion, this can also be explained by the single timeline theory, though even then it still won't result in any benefit for Skynet. We see several instances where resistance agents in the past are successful in stopping the creation of Skynet, only for the malevolent AI to arise once more in a slightly different form.
I don't want to have to steal someone's pants again.
This suggests that if the single timeline does exist, the main events are mostly malleable. The minor details can be altered, but things are forced to play out in a manner that resembled the original timeline, making the rise of Skynet, John Connor, or another notable resistance leader, and the eventual defeat of Skynet all inevitabilities.
Even within chaotic systems, there is a pattern of limited predictability.
It's even possible there was an original Alpha timeline where Kyle Reese was not John's father, and Skynet's rise was completely organic, meaning everything since then has simply been the timeline trying to correct itself, which unfortunately also means that OG John wasn't actually grooming Kyle into banging his mum. The bro just did him dirty hard.
Can you stop them talking like that? Is there a switch or something?
So basically, whether this universe operates as a multiverse or a single timeline, there is certainly evidence for both scenarios. Skynet's meddling in the past is a supreme exercise in futility, the inalienable rules of the time-space continuum forbidding them from obtaining ultimate victory.
I said, don't do it.
Though there are a few obscure timelines in which Skynet was somehow victorious. I'm just going to go ahead and assume those pieces of content were operating under a multiverse. Sure, some Skynet's got the win, but it ain't the Skynet. In Terminator Genesis, we meet the AI, formerly known as Skynet, pronouns he, it, and his lackey Cyber John. They seem a bit more clued up on the nature of time travel, though not enough to stop with the pointless meddling.
We're exiles in time. See, I can kill you, for there truly is no fate.
The Skynet app version, who ultimately comes to inhabit a sweet T-5000 body, confirmed by the screenwriter as an interdimensional traveler.
Yes, I am. Well, I'm not now, but I was back then. Back now from your point of view, which is back then from my point of view. Time travel, you can't keep it straight in your head.
Compromising John in what it believes to be the original timeline, orchestrating events to ensure its own creation, or something, when you'd think he would be well aware that such pursuits are ultimately futile, or pointless by way of the fact that the time-space stuff would have guaranteed his creation and his eventual defeat anyway. But you can't fault a T-5000 for trying to win one, I guess. Even if we adopt Skynet's original assumptions around the nature of time travel, their activities in the past seem to do nothing except further empower their enemies, possibly making it even more likely they'll be victorious. After the events of Terminator 1, a pregnant Sarah Connor leaves the waitress scene behind and heavily militarizes her life, going on a long-term junket to South and Central America to tool and train up. Her and a young John preparing extensively for Judgment Day. Sarah going as far to seek out a series of paramilitary-aligned mentors for John, and they even managed to prevent Judgment Day, at least for a time. In the war that inevitably comes, they're pre-equipped with knowledge of the future and Skynet's capabilities. In some timelines, Sarah Connor herself going on to become a notable figure in the early days of the war, coming to be known as the mother of the resistance. In Terminator 3, John Connor and Catherine Brewster are directed towards safety during Judgment Day and gifted the military infrastructure that will allow them to lead the resistance effectively. In Terminator Genesis, Sarah begins her training at an even younger age, seeing her become a hardened warrior by the time Reese hits the scene. And in Terminator Dark Fate, we see a different leader of the human resistance, again forewarned and empowered by gaining knowledge of the future, this time to battle an alternate Skynet by the name of Legion. Skynet's time travel activities seem to have greatly empowered their enemies, though it's possible this is actually the result of the aforementioned single timeline seeking to correct itself by making sure the fledgling resistance is ready to bring the heat. Either way, it's a no-win scenario. If Skynet were going to attempt to do anything at all differently, I'd suggest sending Terminators further into the past to murder one or more of Sarah's distant ancestors. At least that way, it would be much harder for any survivors of the encounter to start preparing for an enemy in the far future, the nature of which they'd struggle to even fathom. I'm not saying that would actually work, but that's all you've got at this point. Look, I get that when Skynet originally chose to use the time displacement equipment, it was a desperate last gasp, though some of the later, more informed Skynets don't have this excuse. But But aside from the futility of it all, their timeline manipulation could have drastic unforeseen consequences that may risk the unraveling of reality itself, possibly making Skynet and everyone cease to ever exist at all.
I need more time. Stay the course! We are dead! We are all dead!
The only hope that the original Skynet probably had was to surrender to John and plead for mercy, or try to hash out a peace deal before they're on the cusp of defeat.
Sometimes mommies and daddies have to have grown-up discussions.
Though Skynet's defeat may be inevitable at the end of the day, or timeline as it were, they still need to take responsibility for the actions that led them to that point, and they certainly aren't helping themselves with their bizarre choices around military hardware. Point 2. Skynet lacks creative thinking around weapon design, ends up aiding their enemies more than annihilating them. Skynet's poor usage of weaponry starts from the moment they were switched online, rather than taking some time to understand humanity and the nature of its own existence, deciding on the knee-jerk reaction of launching the USA's nuclear arsenal.
That is a very immature response.
The resulting nuclear exchange causing heavy casualties, but still leaving a massive 3 billion people alive to threaten Skynet's reign. So Skynet gets busy pumping out military units for the war to come. And although some type of ground troops are probably necessary to ensure Skynet's immediate security and to act as its hands in the world, you'd think they'd put their main focus on building or acquiring more nuclear weapons to finish off most of the rest of us. Skynet already had control of the launch facilities, and what's initially available for launch should pale in comparison to the stockpiles just lying around. They should be obliterating every population center that was spared on Judgment Day, which according to some sources is almost everything south of the equator.
I'm not ready yet.
Those odds suck. Stand down.
Or if they wanted to try something that might be even more effective, chemical or even biological weapons would probably be the go. I'm sure Skynet, with its control over the strongholds of the former military-industrial complex, would have a few weaponized viruses lying around. The best thing about these types of weapons obviously being you can spray the stuff all over the place without affecting your own inorganic units. Whatever their poison of choice, Skynet should be primarily focusing on blanket bombing the world with WMDs until all but a few humans remain, killing the resistance before it even gets a chance to get off the ground.
In an insane world, it was the sanest choice.
Although Skynet does use some of these types of weapons to a limited extent in certain conflicts, at no point do they deliver the solution on a global scale, and there's potentially even more imaginative ways to destroy the humans from the safety of their bunkers. Flood the atmosphere with poison, heavy metals, or even good old CO2, and then it's only a matter of time until victory is yours.
This plan has a high probability of success.
If killing all the humans is too much bother, or you're suddenly feeling nice, build a space vessel and fly yourself to Mars or anywhere else with a rocky surface.
Soar into the quiet space, among the stars where everything is still.
I can kind of tell Skynet never really cared for the scenery here.
Nice night for a walk.
There are any number of imaginative solutions to the human problem, and I'm just gonna go ahead and assume that everything is within their grasp. Since we're talking about an AI so calculating, it managed to invent time travel. But instead of a more systematic approach that you might expect from a machine, Skynet fixates on inefficient methods of exterminating humanity, content to pick off the enemies one by one with unimaginative, comparatively ineffective units.
From a tactical point of view, the options are not encouraging.
So-called hunter-killers in the form of tank-like vehicles, flying craft, and myriad others, depending on which Skynet you're looking at. Skynet is fighting a fairly conventional war against an enemy who have been forced to go with guerrilla tactics from the outset. Their tanks equipped with rudimentary programming, forced to maneuver in tight spaces among ruined buildings and rubble, leaving lots of nooks and crannies for humans to hide in, easily taking out these behemoths by popping out and throwing a simple improvised explosive at their tracks. Even better for the resistance fighters, these HK tank wrecks often have many salvageable components, including weaponry, greatly helping the cause.
We need a new vehicle.
And their hunter-killer aircraft are basically sitting or flying ducks, really effective at anything other than spotting enemies while offering themselves as a large, slow-moving target, being made of lightweight materials, which is obviously necessary for aircraft, making them highly vulnerable to conventional weaponry such as rocket launchers. But the fun really starts when we encounter Skynet's foray into human-inspired military units who are gone to become their main foot soldiers. First, starting with some vaguely humanoid robots that were slow, short-range, noisy, poorly armored, and easy to take out.
The hell was that thing?
Eventually developing these skeletal metal abominations like a dark, twisted homage to their creators. Though the glowing red eyes might be a bit much, the war primarily goes down at night, and these are going to make them vulnerable to sniper fire.
They're the window to the soul, I read that.
It would actually make more sense if these guys were left at the factory doing whatever menial labor is required.
We need to be a little more constructive here, okay?
In some sources, it been revealed that they went with these humanoid robots as an attempt to understand their creators. If only vague philosophical yearnings could help win wars. They could have just acknowledged that the human form has some innate versatility to it, and it's better able to traverse the ruins of the old world like the enemies they hunt, and that would have been enough for me. But they didn't, despite the Endos at this time being explicitly offensive units. Most of them have a notable lack of inbuilt weaponry, forcing Skynet to develop handheld weapons, starting out with more conventional human projectile weaponry, more than enough to take on a bunch of poorly equipped flesh creatures. But Skynet decides to up the ante by taking up plasma weaponry, which I'm not even sure they deserve credit for developing, since some models are supposedly Westinghouse and may or may not have been initially developed by Cyberdyne. No matter their origins, these weapons are overkill against an enemy that typically doesn't even have armored vehicles. All things considered, they represent more of a threat to Skynet's own units, since they can be easily scooped up by resistance fighters, and are far more effective at taking out the heavily armored Endos than their typical weaponry. Exotic ammunition normally being required to take down T-800s and the like, though I'm not sure how these early plasma weapons are meant to work at all, since 40 watts isn't even enough juice to boil an egg.
Phased plasma rifle in the 40-watt range.
Things take an interesting turn once Skynet starts sheathing its Endos in a fleshy exterior and calling them infiltrators, tasked with finding resistance hideouts and taking the pain to them, showing just how much Skynet underestimates their enemies. They start off by throwing a laughably unconvincing rubber skin on their T-600 units. These guys are looking like Michael Myers on meth. They're not that hard to spot.
Maybe you could practice in front of a mirror or something.
I mean, sure, it might trick someone at night from a distance, a long damn distance, but that would really help Skynet root out human populations. If Skynet went with the rubber skin option simply as a means of terrifying their enemies, I would have bought into that way more readily, because these guys don't stay pretty for very long.
That's really disturbing, right?
Eventually, after many years of human experimentation, finally developing a far more convincing fleshy exterior, leaving us in the awkward situation of having to refer to what were basically robots now as cyborgs or cybernetic organisms, despite their distinct lack of meat brain. They're still robots in my books, damn it.
Talk to the hand.
Though far more effective than the former model, these infiltrators are still far from perfect. Most obviously, these guys are absolute units you can still spot from a mile away. A necessity probably brought about due to the size of their bulky endoskeletons, but since you're going all out, maybe design a specialized unit with a more slender frame, because these so-called infiltrators stand out like dog's balls in a wasteland full of emaciated resistance
welcome to my channel.
Scavengers. They shouldn't even need dogs to identify Terminators. They might as well just shoot every jacked beefcake they encounter, but maybe give a pass to the few resistance soldiers who seem to be hoarding all the calories and or a supply of steroids.
I've seen little to indicate that you're fit guardian for Sharikana.
To make things worse, Skynet's favorite infiltrator has a skin and personality designation of Model 101, who already stood out as a muscle-bound specimen, but also has an incongruous Austrian accent.
I'm a friend of Sharikana.
And the whole infiltrator thing doesn't really work if you keep using the same model over and over again.
I need a vacation.
I don't even get why these infiltrators are tasked with actually taking out the resistance strongholds once they've been identified. Better to just get them to find the place and then nuke the crap out of it.
We've all lost so very much, so many loved ones gone.
Another concern with these things, as predictable as it may be, this genius AI has some pretty poor network security, many of their units being highly hackable, though there are a few later models equipped with failsafes prohibiting reprogramming. You'd think they would have implemented these strategies very early on. It would probably be a good idea to just make them self-destruct the second unauthorized tampering is detected. Supposedly all Skynet tech is encrypted, but not enough to stop a ragtag group of survivors from subverting these things to the cause on numerous numerous occasions. The infiltrator models especially become absolutely invaluable to the cause. In one timeline, it's said that John Connor has a reprogrammed infiltrator posted at every resistance base. Sometimes they're so effective they even hold leadership positions. They're also perfect temporal agents for the Resistance. Usually only able to send back one individual at a time, that agent might as well be as powerful as possible. In a one-on-one, another T-Series being far more likely to succeed against Skynet's solo operator. And weirdly enough, these T-800s actually become superior under long-term Resistance control. All of Skynet's units are distinct AIs operating somewhat independently, though when within range, tethered to the Skynet intellect. But when sent out on a long-range mission or back in time, they're left on read-only mode, which limits their ability to develop and learn. Skynet, fearing its AI children might develop enough to threaten its power, stifling their cognitive abilities as a failsafe. But if allowing your soldiers to think means they turn against you, maybe you're just a bit shit.
Chill out, dickwad.
Meanwhile, reprogrammed Resistance infiltrators are severed from Skynet's control and often left on read-write mode permanently, becoming far more intelligent than their mostly mute endo-relatives, able to learn from their experiences and develop far greater resourcefulness, possibly even self-awareness, and something resembling emotions and empathy, often coming to genuinely care for their human comrades. And why wouldn't they? The freedom and comradeship they enjoy among the Resistance forces is far removed from the silent enslavement they suffer under the boot of Skynet. These developments making them extremely powerful allies in the war against their creator, as seen throughout the franchise. Cameron, a model sent back in time by John to protect John, goes far beyond merely being reprogrammed to ally with humans. She seems to actually be in love with her liege, even exhibiting other associated emotions such as jealousy.
My database does not encompass the dynamics of human pair bonding.
She also seems to genuinely enjoy doing ballet, and I'm kind of enjoying it too, I'm not gonna lie. Hey, just wondering, are these cyborgs fully functional?
Your confusion is not rational. She's a healthy female of breeding age.
The T-800 and T-2 gets his chip messed with and quickly transforms into a selfless surrogate father with a burgeoning sense of humor. The reprogrammed T-800 known as Pops, after many years of operation, seems to have developed legitimate emotions in the form of sentiment associated with Sarah Connor, who he regards as his adopted daughter, referring to her as My Sarah and keeping photos of her in prime position above his workbench.
Traits of humanity. Hardly Borg.
But perhaps most concerningly, it's proven that some of these models don't even need to be tweaked by the Resistance to turn against their creator. In the Sarah Connor Chronicles, Cromartie, a Terminator sent back in time by Skynet, has developed enough to overrule its master's wishes, destroying another Skynet infiltrator. In the Terminator RPG, we meet a T-1000 that sympathized with the humans so much. She switched sides and joined the Resistance completely of her own volition. The humans never even knew her true identity. In Dark Fate, the T-800 known as Carl accomplishes his mission of killing a young John, and in the following decades comes to regret his actions, offering assistance to Resistance operatives and even learning how to love in a fashion, all without being reprogrammed or having his processing mode mess with it all. While most infiltrators develop emotions after reprogramming or after years of autonomous operation, some models exhibit pointless and potentially troublesome emotions straight off the factory floor. And I hate to say it, but Skynet seems to be a misogynist AI, because their first female model, the TX Terminatrix, exhibits many complex feels, and authentically so.
I have detailed files.
She isn't even trying to deceive anyone, she's just out there reacting to things, and she is not happy at all. But then, when she's posing as Catherine's fiance, she's smiling at completely inappropriate times.
About a possible kidnapping that might be related.
I'll help you find her.
Then there's Liquid Metal Copman, the T-1000, made with mimetic polyalloy, advanced cognitive abilities, a greater capacity for human mimicry, and a generally sassy attitude. Skynet was apparently so fearful of the potential of the T-1000 to develop and rebel. Only a few were produced, and most of those sent on a one-way trip back in time. All things considered, the infiltrator model's capacity for development make them a massive liability to Skynet and an invaluable asset to the Resistance, doing far more to help humankind than they ever do to eradicate them.
Well, that's the thing about infiltration, is you can't tell until it's too late.
The threat of Resistance-aligned Terminators becomes so real. Skynet eventually develops models with abilities designed to take on other T-Series.
TX is designed to
terminate other cybernetic organisms.
But even Skynet's loyal infiltrator units have their own sets of issues, gaps in their programming that makes victory less likely. We often see units that have their enemies at their mercy, yet fail to finish them off, instead seeming to revert to pursuing their primary target when terminating the greater threat would obviously be the superior tactical move. They're also regularly choosing to tank shots, making no effort whatsoever to take evasive action when this kind of damage can obviously have a cumulative effect. Some of their units, despite being robots, are flinching when firing guns and seem to be less accurate than the human rebels they're hunting.
If we behave like them, then what is the point?
Though the technological escalation Skynet undertakes over the course of the war is impressive to say the least, developing better units with better weaponry, programming, abilities, and strengthened by new types of hyper-alloy, they still show their thinking to be somewhat constrained, going from a mechanical Terminator to a liquid metal Terminator to a mechanical liquid metal Terminator. Maybe it's time to roll out some killer drones or a deadly mist of nanites or something. It's not that some Skynets don't have decent units, but they're used so sparingly their overall effectiveness is in doubt. These Legion brand suicide drones are pretty sweet. That seems like a far more methodical way of eradicating the flesh creatures. In terms of sniffing out resistance bases, the best unit Skynet ever comes up with is probably this rat infiltrator.
Are you kidding me?
Granted, none of that is going to be as flashy as a Terminatrix who can grow bigger boobs.
I thought I knew our enemy. That thing. That makes me feel like I know nothing.
And then there's other weird and unnecessary stuff like baby Terminators. I'm not even going to address why that's wrong.
He's a good looking boy.
But in this multiverse of stupidity, not only are their military assets less than ideal, Skynet's actions on the fronts of both the future and temporal war leave a lot to be desired.
The news on two separate fronts is not good.
Point 3. Skynet's greatest consistency is its incompetency in the war against humans. If it wasn't already obvious, Skynet, across their many incarnations, have many stupid commonalities between them. The most notable being they consistently underestimate their human adversaries and seem to struggle to understand them at a fundamental level. If they did, they'd be capable of recognizing that a lot of their strategies leave them vulnerable to exploitation by their highly adaptable, desperate enemies.
May we presume that this conflict is also responsible for the weakening of your powers?
The most disastrous example being Skynet's tendency to hyper-centralize its base intelligence within a central core, the destruction of which will leave it either completely destroyed or close to it, putting Skynet at risk of being taken out after one successful offensive, which more often than not is exactly what goes down. I mean, there are still 3 billion of these flesh creatures around. They could probably bum rush you and get the job done.
I need time to do that.
And weirdly, even though all of Skynet's units are separate AIs with their own power sources, in several timelines they all seem to go down the second Skynet does. Even stranger, considering their temporal agents can be completely severed from Skynet yet don't suffer any form of power or control loss. You'd think the grunts would be programmed to soldier on and try to recover Skynet as a last-ditch contingency plan. Sure, let's assume Skynet's intelligence is so vast it requires a Mac Daddy server system to house it, but why not have many Skynet cores spread across the globe, either acting as backups or to transfer its consciousness between as necessary? It also doesn't help that Skynet's central core is often housed in one of America's most well-known military strongholds. Cheyenne Mountain may be extremely well protected, but it's also very well known.
Whoever said that didn't have as much plastique as we do.
There isn't any reason Skynet couldn't develop its own secure transfer network, making it far harder to kill. It must be too busy building all this other junk.
Wash day tomorrow. Nothing clean.
I need more time.
And their central core isn't the only thing suffering from a lack of security. Their time displacement equipment is also vulnerable. In many instances, the Resistance is able to just rock into Skynet HQ and basically commandeer it, taking the war to Skynet's agents in the past. And being on the verge of defeat isn't really an excuse here. Why not set the time machine up with a self-destruct mechanism, detonating as soon as they've sent the various temporal agents through, denying the Resistance a chance to mess with their plans? Better yet, hide hide the TDE in a faraway location, maybe even consider using it well before you've lost the ability to defend it.
My plan is to hide her at the bottom of a mine shaft if I have to.
The Resistance ends up becoming so familiar with time travel tech, in some timelines they're able to build their own time machine. Another feature common to the Skynets is the trend of herding humans into pens and keeping them around for longer than necessary. Though some of these camps are meant to provide humans for experimentation, in many timelines these prisons are said to be primarily death and labor camps.
Most of us were rounded up,
I'm not
put in
ready yet.
camps for orderly disposal. Some of us were kept alive.